Very much, ladies and gentlemen. Right now I got to tell you about different modern approaches to diverse society, and we will try to figure out their outcome for majority and minority groups. This presentation is based on Laura, Celeste and Ali paper and research conducted in Belgian Flemish secondary schools from year 2019. So, let's go. To start with, we have three main strategies of managing diverse community. First, multiculturalism. As you know, it is about valuing diversity and different cultures and about celebrating it. A multicultural approach seeks to include minorities through affirming their distinct cultural identities. For example, in school we can celebrate diversity days. In contrary, colorblindness is a strategy that tends to ignore cultural diversity. Colorblindness is something Western societies use when it comes to religious diversity. We just tell, it's your private business, so don't go public with it. In public, we use completely different criteria of categorization. You know, it's an idea that we can neutralize prejudice and discrimination by de-emphasizing group categories and ignoring group differences. And finally, assimilationism. This approach simply rejects cultural diversity. Under assimilationism, minorities are expected to adopt the majority culture and to relinquish the distinct minority cultures, or even any markers of it. The aim is to foster a common identity, like in the melting pot idea in the United States. So, if we are to measure outcomes of policies, what criteria should we take? What do we want from these policies? Well, it depends on values, obviously. But for example, we can be deeply egalitarian and say that we want to maximize minorities' performance chances for success and minimize discrepancy between majority and minority. If you don't know, this is Sadiq Khan, Mayor of London, who is from minority. Secondly, we can say we want maximum number of people to feel good in our society, to identify with it. Or we can be materialists and seek for a resolution that is best for economy. Or we can stress security and seek for solution that will prevent disorder and riots. Now, we can't measure whole societies when it comes to predicting outcomes of policies, just because it is too complex. We can instead take small organizations or communities like schools or workplaces. And in our study, authors did so. They went to 66 Flemish secondary schools and examined 1,131 students twice, with 1 year gap between measurements. Moreover, researchers read all schools' internal documents, statuses and policies, and coded individual regulations to assess which approach is used by schools. And for our study, authors took criteria of feeling of belonging and performance, measured by self-reported school grades from Dutch language. These two are connected because research shows that lack of belonging negatively affects grades. Please remember that belonging is here understood as identification with school and not with the country. So, what do we know from this study and from other studies? Let's start with multiculturalism. In schools where multiculturalism was introduced, there was no gap between groups in belonging and identification with school. Some analysis showed that it was partially due to less belonging in majority group. It would be consistent with some studies reporting that multiculturalism is threatening for majority. But after authors of our study conducted other analysis, this effect didn't occur. And when multiculturalism was low, there was significant gap in belonging between majority and minority students. And regarding grades, multiculturalism did not differentiate majority students' grades, but had positive effect on minority grades. Okay, so regarding colorblindness, there were three conclusions. First, the more colorblind school, the lower minority students' grades. Second, there was no impact on majority grades. And third, there was no impact of colorblindness on belonging. And this is curious because it is inconsistent with other studies where colorblindness correlated positively with majority belonging and achievement. So, why this change? Well, because it depends on what we value in colorblindness. In Belgian schools, colorblindness means to emphasize secularism, non-discrimination, and individualism. But in other countries, it is often about valuing competence and achievement. And finally, effects of assimilationism. First thing, there was no effects considering grades. There was only one effect, less belonging in minority. And there was significant gap in belonging between minority and majority. So, which strategy is the best? It depends on our values mostly, but also research are inconsistent. If we want to maximize minority and majority gains, it seems like multiculturalism is at least not bad. But please remember, it was only in school context. So, thank you for your attention and goodbye.